welcome to this edition of Inside the Academy Studio.
Today's conversation will be about Alexander Payne's Nebraska. Nebraska was written by Bob Nelson, and it is a tale of discovery. When David Grant, played by Will Forte, finally cedes to his elderly father, Woody Grant, played by Bruce Dern, and takes a trip across state lines to claim the $1 million prize that Woody has his eyes set on. On the way, they encounter personal injury, personal discovery, and a hell of a lot of family and friends who have a lot to say about the money and about Woody Grant's life. Bringing in my co-host now, this is a return to form for Alexander Payne. He's returned to telling stories about his home state of Nebraska. Why do you think Payne is so effective, first of all, in telling the story of the plains or the so-called flyover states in America?
I think it's because he's able to find his niche in storytelling that a lot of other movies, whether they be indie, whether they be mainstream, that don't cover. I mean, you don't usually hear about the rural side of things. I mean, even a lot of indie movies are going to focus on people living in New York, people living in LA, because those are what the filmmakers are used to. So when they want to reflect their own life. But Payne comes from Nebraska, so I think he wants to reflect his own previous life in Nebraska. So that's why you see a lot of movies about Nebraska.
Yeah, I think it's not just the setting of Nebraska. It's the ability in his directorial style to take those quirks of the town, of the people, of the setting, and kind of frame it in the, that comedic way that he likes to do, but it's always presented in a refreshing manner, right? I feel that, you're never tired watching an Alexander Payne film because there's always those, either the spot characters or those, just the scenes in this movie, especially at Woody Grant's old house, that discovery of just an old part of this state, this town, but the way he frames it, taking the camera inside the house is just an interesting way of looking at it. Furthermore, this is one of the first movies, I think it may be the first movie that Payne hasn't written himself. He's one of the great writer-directors in Hollywood right now. But instead, this is a straight adaptation of Bob Nelson. And I think we tend to agree that his familiarity with the actual setting probably is the same as writing it this time. He doesn't lose anything by not writing this film. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly didn't notice from the previous Alexander Payne films I've watched, I didn't notice any misstep. I think Bob Nelson's writing matched very well with Alexander Payne's direction. Which moves me on, I wanted to also talk about the acting. I mean, Payne or Nelson or whoever made the casting decision made a very risky choice by casting Will Forte in lead role. Obviously more well known for Saturday Night Live, obviously more well known for comedies if you ever made a movie. So to make it a movie that is still very comedic and I think still falls into many people's definition of a comedy, how do you think he fits into a movie that's a lot more grounded than a MacGruber?
Definitely more grounded than MacGruber. I was impressed by Forte. First of all, his dynamic with Bob Odenkirk, who plays his older brother, is fantastic. The scenes that they have, dismissing or encouraging their parents, are some of the best. And I think Forte, the reason he was cast was that Payne felt that if June Squibb and Bruce Dern had a child, he'd kind of look like Will Forte. So he definitely plays the part, but I think he was fantastic in, especially for Forte's David Grant, it's a real role of a discovery. He doesn't know much about his father. What he knows may be the lies or the point of view from his mother. So it's interesting having him discover what Woody felt and, the scenes where he's looking back at Woody's war experience and his old flames. I think Forte does well, but obviously if you consider Forte the star, I feel that the other star, or the other lead, is obviously Bruce Dern, who won lead actor at the Cannes Film Festival this year. Dern is just a professional actor who's been around for many years. his famous daughter Laura Dern. But in this performance, he plays a quiet, sullen man, but it's such a still physical performance. If he doesn't say much, but you can feel, the aged bones and the, when the disappointment comes, you can feel that in his eyes and the way he moves. I want you to maybe talk about how you think Bruce Dern does in this part.
I think I honestly couldn't imagine anybody else other than Bruce Dern playing this because I think it also helps that unlike a lot of other well-respected older actors, Bruce Dern isn't really known for being X role in some movies, right? To at least to a lot of modern day audiences. For example, like in About Schmidt, people know Jack Nicholson for whatever Jack Nicholson has done before.
Yeah, it's a great comparison. Dern, you can kind of get lost in the role, where Nicholson, you're always looking for those Nicholson eccentricities. But even though those two actors are probably on par in how they performed under the direction of Payne.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we talked about how grounded this movie is, but how funny this movie is. I think it's because Dern plays the older grandpa, the older dad that everyone kind of has, where he's stubborn and he doesn't really get along with other people a lot. But then where he also shows how much he does actually care sometimes and how much humor you get from a conversation with him.
Absolutely. And the Academy has nominated him this year as Best Actor. Obviously, I think one of the most surprising performance came from June Squibb, who plays Woody Grant's husband, Bruce Dern's partner in crime in this film, at almost 84 years of age. It's such an energetic performance, and I think it speaks to what you said of relatable in terms of what your grandparents or your parents to be, brutally honest, but deeply sympathetic. And I think June Squibb really does a magnificent job.
Yeah, I mean, I think without a doubt, she's definitely the funniest character in this movie. I think
that scene in the cemetery alone, it basically fills you in on everything you need to know about Woody Grant's Old Town plus his entire family, and it's just such fantastic work.
Yeah, exactly. Like a scene like that could have easily been such a drag on the movie because it was like, okay, like we don't know these characters well. Like, why do we want to get to know them? But the way June Squibb is able to carry out that scene, like we're really engrossed in like how what this town is really like. I mean, I really liked it.
Yeah, this is a movie without a lot of big stakes, but then a scene with pretty big stakes, that fight with all the cousins and about the money. It's June Squibb's character that actually kind of lays that proverbial smackdown by standing up for her son, standing up for her husband, and kind of giving it to everyone. So you wouldn't expect in a movie with very little stakes that the biggest stakes come from this 83-year-old actress. Going on a little tangent here, does this film in any way resonate to you in depicting, I think Payne did it in About Schmidt too, the modern experience for the older generation, say in America, how they're kind of acclimating to the changing America that's in front of us, that so many in the younger generation are obviously so comfortable with, but may still hold some sort of stumbling blocks for an older generation.
I think it kind of reflects that this generation didn't really expect to be living in a society like this. But I think we won't be expecting living in a society 6 years from now. I'm sure of that. So that's why I think the movie does touch upon that. But I think what it also touches upon is how an old person feels about their own kind of life. Like they know I think Bruce Dern's character reflects it the most. He knows when he's older, he's not gonna be a millionaire. So I think that's why he holds on this hope that he is a millionaire, because he wants to give that last shot after everything he's messed up in his life to help his family. So I think that's really reflected in the plot and the acting.
Yeah, even if that storyline's a bit far-fetched, that $1 million chase, but it still kind of grounds back to all the character moments where, it's unraveled where Bruce Dern and Woody Grant's character, you see all the achievements he had, how he would help his family fix their cars, and he owned a shop. But the fact that he spent all that money. Kind of it went to places where he needed to. He took care of his family, and now he kind of gets that realization that, hey, there's nothing left. What's my further legacy? And that's what kind of carries him towards that $1 million prize at the end.
Yeah, definitely. I think it shows that it's not quite black and white, ironically. So that carries me on to the next point I want to bring up quickly. What do you think of the decision to shoot this movie in black and white?
I'm always a fan for the sepia tone or the black and white tone for an artistic decision, and I feel they were right in their decision this time. They wanted to make it look sort of iconic and taking place at any time, and I think that fits well with a lot of the elements of the film. We're talking with characters that are in their 70s and 80s. We're talking about a part of America that maybe not everybody relates to, but everybody kind of knows what happens in small towns. Things don't really change that fast. So the black and white in that aspect works really well, setting the stage. Like, if I turned it on, I could see myself, hey, this is a film from the 1950s, because it's kind of depicting that progression of life from the 50s to now with these characters.
Yeah, and I was thinking another reason that I think Payne made the decision to shoot it in black and white is to keep the focus on the characters. By shooting it in black and white, I think it doesn't really bring out the full color that you would see in a Nebraska plains, which I think for sure if you shot it in full digital HD cinemascope, whatever, it would come out actually quite beautiful. And I think in a point that would kind of people would talk about how beautifully the film is shot, not about the characters. I mean, they would still talk about the characters, but I think he wanted to keep even more of the focus on the characters.
See, I never thought of that way. I never thought, the scenery would take away. I thought black and white actually kind of helped the scenery still, especially the final scene. This distance and that horizon is still framed very well. But it's an interesting comment that the light and the greens and the yellows would have taken away. We're almost nearing the end of this edition of Inside the Academy Studio, and like always, we like to end with questions. So I ask, what was your favorite moment in Nebraska?
My favorite moment, you mentioned this a few minutes ago. I really like the scene where Woody and the family visits his childhood home. I think it really showed exactly what a lot of older people feel like. I mean, they're almost at the end of their life, and they realize that. So I think when he says things like, when he enters his parents' room and he says, if my parents found me in here, they'd probably beat me. I think that's not really he misses his parents as much. I think he knows his parents have been dead for decades. I think it's more that he misses all the youth he had left, all the time he had left. Now he feels like he doesn't have time anymore.
Great. My favorite moment returns to that interplay between Will Forte and Bob Odenkirk, the two brothers. And I really like that they really try to fulfill their dad's wish in getting that air compressor that his partner took. And then they realized they actually ended up on the wrong farm. So that scene where they first steal the air compressor, then they have to put it back, and then they're caught red-handed and they have to wait in the barn, and their mom has to eventually drive out and make an excuse to get out, and then they kind of chase the car. It's just a brilliant 5 to 7 minute scene of fulfilling a lot of the things that the movie wanted, and it was a hilarious moment. Your least favorite moment in Nebraska?
I think my least favorite moment has to be a little bit early on. It's during the first road trip when Woody and his son are going to Nebraska. They take the stop at Mount Rushmore. I thought, I thought maybe, okay, sure, we go to Mount Rushmore. But then after the scene was finished and I saw all the other things that could have been done if we added more scenes with the family in its place, I think it didn't really serve the purpose of the film, I believe.
Okay. My least favorite moment was a family moment. It's the two cousins that the Grants have, that David Grant has, really simple-minded folk. But the scene where they, try to rob Woody and take the certificate, it kind of seemed like farce to me, a little bit too much. I think those characters were best used more minimally than they eventually were, and it kind of, was a little, not really feeling that scene and that heist robbery scene. We're almost done, but we like to end with word association. So when you think Nebraska, what word do you think of?
Family.
And I think of trucks. So when we think Nebraska, we think family and trucks. That is this edition of Inside the Academy Studio.
Thank you.